Ben as vice chair to run the meeting. Hey, Tony, nice to see you. Let's see, I think you are now recording. Is that right, Todd? Okay, great. So this is the Public Records Advisory Council meeting on March 13th. We're here for a very short meeting. Let's just quickly approve the agenda. The agenda, which is in front of me somewhere right here. The agenda is to approve the agenda and then to hear about this HB 5035, the Secretary of State's budget request bill requesting funding for new public records positions. And PK Runkles will present. Does anybody want to add anything to the agenda, or can you have approval of the agenda?
I would move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving this agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, we're all in favor. Let's go ahead. So PK, yes, please tell us about the bill. And also, can you just specify what you'd like the PRAC to, what are you seeking from the PRAC and bringing it to the PRAC? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, and thank you folks for gathering for this hopefully very short meeting. The Secretary of State has a budget requests, as you mentioned, HB 5035, which requests a new position related to public records. And we think that this is an important position for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not there just to support the Secretary of State. This would be a new model in which the Secretary of State would also be working with and coordinating with the public records folks for the counties through the county clerks. So what's happening currently is that we're getting in the elections world, as you may imagine, there's a great deal of interest in that area, and many of the clerks all over the country, but also here in Oregon, are receiving nearly identical requests from many different people for information related to elections. And they are repeatedly reaching out to the Secretary of State for assistance with this. And so that's the purpose of the request, is to get somebody who can do that, not just for SOS, but for the 36 counties, some of whom have only one person in their offices for what it's worth, and are really struggling. And the idea of bringing it to the PRAC is that I know we've had conversations here before that if we are going to have a broad public records requirement, we should also be willing to support that. And what's happening currently, in my view, is that the legislature is mandating very broad requests, as they should. Transparency is important. But then not being willing to fund them. And so we see this as a way where the PRAC could speak up for that principle. So what we'd be seeking is for the PRAC to support that request by either showing up or sending written testimony in support of the ask. And if it's all right, Madam Chair, I've brought with me Ben Morris from my office, who's more knowledgeable about the bill, who might have a few things to add about it.
That sounds great to me to hear from Ben. Want to go ahead, Ben?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, PK, and everyone for having me on today. PK covered, I think, a lot of this. One thing I want to add is just the issue with workload. We have the Archives Division at the Oregon Secretary of State that is immersed in public records, but in our Elections and Audits Division and in our executive team, we have 0 FTE for public records work. So we are stitching it together in our spare time from myself, PK, and several staff in the Elections Division. And the workload is significant. Last year, on average, we were receiving between 30 and 40 public records requests per month. During the election season, it spiked significantly. In August of 2022, we got 126 records requests in a single month, all related to elections. And again, with no full-time person to take up that work. So it creates a challenge. It took us months to get out of that backlog that was created by that. And many of these requests were duplicated throughout the state, as PK mentioned. We would receive one, but then it would also go to all 36 counties. And there was no mechanism in place to coordinate to make sure the response was consistent, to prevent duplication of effort where it wasn't needed, things like that. We could do a lot better of a job if there was a coordinating position. at the Secretary of State's office. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's really all I have to add. The budget request is for a single position to fill this need. They would work in the executive team at the Secretary of State's office, where they would have the ability to do coordination with all the different divisions, so audits, elections, corporations, and also externally coordinate with counties on the election-related stuff. Happy to answer any questions you have, but I think that covers it.
Great, thank you, Ben. Folks have questions? Shasta.
Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, I definitely think that government should fund, whatever is necessary for people to get the information that they want. So I'm sorry for my lack of familiarity, but Ben and PK, are you guys SOS comm staff or?
Ben is SOS comm staff. I am the chief legal counsel and a member of PRAC
Okay.
for the secretary. Yeah.
I'm the communications director for the agency.
Okay, great. And so how many comm staff are there?
There are 2 on the executive team, myself and a social media graphic designer position, and there is 1 communications person in the audits division, and that's it for the agency.
Okay. All right, that seems reasonable. It's not like you guys have 20 people and okay, and then with this new person, would there be any sort of requirement to create a report on how those 36 systems could be improved? We've talked a lot about transparency by design on the council, and somebody in that kind of a position doing that sort of work on elections, I think you might have the ability to kind of look at all these systems and say, hey, if it was just designed this way, maybe, we wouldn't need a staff person to do it. So
Yeah,
We haven't
that's
really
exactly
talked about that at this point, Shasta. I think a lot of the work that this person would be doing would be assisting with some of the technical aspects of providing public records in an elections setting. A lot of the requests that we get are for things that relate to specific software or specific voter rolls or something like that. And so simply by having that expertise there about what can be provided and how it can be provided, we think that we can do a lot to improve the system without providing a report. I mean, at some point, if we get past those issues and there's additional time for that person to do something, I could imagine,
Right.
that happening, but I don't think it's part of the plan at this point. Sorry if I interrupted you, Ben. Do you have more to add?
No, that's more or less what I was going to say too.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I would just put in a bid for that person to, have some kind of an eye to that, because a lot of times we create these positions and then they're kind of self-perpetuating, whereas, if we design the system from the ground up in the first place to be transparent, it'd be a little easier to get those requests filled. Thank you so much.
Good point.
Shasta. Tony.
Hi, I think the questions were answered, but just out of clarity, so Ben, you mentioned that there were 0 people working in the capacity of being able to handle in the elections divisions of the Secretary of State's office, and administrative, and I think you mentioned another. Are there? So I'm sorry. The question being, the line item says new public records positions in the plural. Are you hiring more than 1 person, or?
The POP is just for a single FTE.
Okay, 1 single.
One person.
And so then my other question was, it sounded like the types of requests would be more data driven that you guys have seen and trending in the last year, or are they more for physical documents?
It's all over the place. The elections division gets requests for data frequently, like the voter registration lists, people's voter profiles. More frequently, they've been getting requests about security related things. People want to see documents showing certification of election equipment. They want to see correspondence between people in the division and federal entities or county entities. It's really hard to pin down one specific type of thing. It's really all over the place.
Okay, but 1 person is enough to you guys feel to be able to handle the not only the Secretary of State's requests, but then the 35, 36 other counties. Sorry, I should have how many counties Oregon has. The number of counties that Oregon clerks need help with.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't replace the county's own public records function entirely. It would just help coordinate when there's duplication. I think one additional person would be a dramatic improvement from myself, my colleague Greg Bergensen, and PK doing it in our spare time in addition to our full-time jobs.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I support it.
Thank you, Tony. Todd?
Hi, PK and Ben. One pushback I've heard from public bodies, especially local public bodies, is that because the idea has been floated of creating a central pool of public records officers that the state could sort of assign as needed. There's also been discussion of a central pot of money. And some public bodies have said, well, the money is more helpful because trying to train outside individuals to come in and assist with their systems and understand their records and their processes would be very complicated and time consuming and maybe not worth the effort. They'd rather have the funding to get their own staff permanently or temporarily. And also I'm hearing that this position would handle public records requests across the Secretary of State's divisions. So one, I'm wondering, this idea of having that person interface with the county elections people, is that more a goal or an actual prescribed percentage of the FTE in the position description? And two, how would you actually effectuate that? What assistance would they be able to offer to local governments with public records requests?
I'm not sure about the FTE in the position description, Todd, but I can tell you that in this particular instance, the Secretary of State is the chief elections officer and is responsible for, on a regular basis, advising and in some cases instructing county clerks on how to handle certain elections functions. And so we are already in very frequent, very regular contact with all 36 county clerks. We have regular weekly meetings and lots of emails between the offices. And one of the things that we regularly provide for those clerks already is technical assistance about their systems. So, in this particular instance, having a person seated in the Secretary of State's office where that coordination and knowledge of system already exists, we see as being a positive benefit. Plus, because so many of the counties are so very small, they don't have, the ability. I don't think anybody would support necessarily adding one FTE in each of the county clerk's offices because there just simply isn't that much to do in some of them. But doing it this way, we think could be quite efficient. We've already been providing some resources for the county clerks on this kind of model. For example, providing some communications support or some support on mis and disinformation, and to a certain extent, some legal support. So while it might not work, statewide in every model, we think that this is one place where it could be efficient. Ben, did you have anything else to add there?
Yeah, only just to say that, we do regular check-ins with the county clerks during election season, and often these things come up. Hey, we got this request. Is anybody else seeing this? Can we work together on this? If we had a person we could actually have follow through on requests like that, it would be just a tremendous benefit.
That's actually a good point, is that I get regular requests from the clerks themselves and from their county council for guidance, coordination, advice on these particular elections related requests, which have just, if you've looked in the news, they've skyrocketed, not just in our state, but across every state in the last few years. And we don't see any reason to suspect that that's going to calm down.
Okay, any other questions? Thanks, everybody. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, PK and Ben, for joining us today and bringing this forward. I want to echo what some of my colleagues have said. I think this is a great idea. I think this is good to have government funding records management. I have a couple of logistical questions, if I might. I'm looking at on all this, and I don't see anything scheduled. So if individual members were interested in submitting, is there a deadline that you'd like us to pay attention to, given that there's nothing scheduled at the moment for this bill?
Our understanding from our legislative person is that they're going to be scheduling something near the beginning of April. So that's when we would be asking for this help. And we'd certainly let you know when we see that coming up for hearing.
Perfect. That'd be great. And then perhaps for Emily or Chair Harris or Todd, rookie on the council. So if we're submitting letters, we do this individually as PRAC members, correct? I think we've done that once already this year. Or are we wouldn't do something as a PRAC group sending one letter, right?
I think there are options. We did send as a PRAC a supportive letter. Todd, Mark wrote it for the Secretary of State, the archive request for support on a bill that I forgot the details. It was about records
Of significance to the tribes.
Right, and handling them in a certain way. So we did send that as the PRAC. But I mean, individuals can do anything they want, of course, anytime. So to send a letter from the PRAC, I think we would just need a majority of a quorum to agree to the general contents of it, draft it, send it around, and get approval in email. I think, is that the procedure we did, or just approve the concept and then send it off, or?
I think it was the latter. We approved the concept and authorized you and Mark to complete it.
Yeah. So we could do one of those steps. Emily, please.
I move that we prepare a letter for, on behalf of the entire PRAC in support.
Second.
Okay, let's have just a little bit of discussion, because I also support that, but I did think the point that Shasta raised was important, that we are really trying to help the state move toward transparency by design, and to like have some tangible, and especially because we know that records issues are problematic for small districts, and we've been looking for ways to support them. If we could build into this somehow, and I know you may not change the bill, but I would like to see this kind of recommendation perhaps in the PRAC's letter, some lessons learned out of this, some nod to the value of that in any letter of support, and encouragement to think of ways to build that in, even as this position is funded. I would, I'd love to see, just a mention of that in the letter. But I support the idea, and I certainly support I'm really glad you guys are thinking these ways. Any thoughts on that? Any further discussion? Shasta?
Yeah, definitely. I would be in favor of that. And then just in the interest of time, I'll say the other thing that I want to say with PK and Ben on the line, which is just, I know this is idealistic and everything, but I heard you mention that this was in addition to your regular full-time job, and just, I think that it's a core function of government to do this. And so I definitely support adding additional staff if there's not enough time to go around. But yeah, having our systems be designed from the ground up to be that transparent is, I think, a core function of what we're trying to do here.
That's what we're trying to do, Shasta. We've inherited, what we've got, and we're trying to work on it to make it more designed to be transparent.
I hear you. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? I guess if we vote on this, does anybody disagree with the idea of putting something in that would, support learning some lessons here to fulfill the goal of supporting small districts and transparency by design? So that's in your Todd.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important that we focus on commenting on the bill as is, but yeah, I agree with including a statement like that as an aspiration for future work, or hopefully, there's something like this will come out of that, but just clearly separating that from what we think about the bill itself.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I think that can probably be gracefully communicated. Okay, any other discussion on this motion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
No opposition. Okay, since this is not a tomorrow request, really appreciate your coming early, PK. Then would you would you let us, do you know if you'll have, how much heads up you'll have? I'm just trying to think of how to, I mean, the best way to fold it in is to have a long deadline. But do you have any idea how far in advance you'll know when you actually need it?
I'm not entirely sure. It's completely dependent on what the legislature decides. So I think the early April is probably the best heads up we could have right now. I don't anticipate it will be sooner than that.
Okay, then I'll just say probably the best logistical thing here is Todd and Mark and I can coordinate on the timing and the writing and the sending, unless there is someone on the PRAC who'd like to volunteer to draft that, but it shouldn't be too hard to do. So how's that sound, Todd? Okay, any objections to that? It sounds okay. All right, no other items of business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, just before that, just some thanks. You know, we're really grateful for your attention to this and coming together and supporting our efforts. And of course, we're very open to feedback from the PRAC in the future about how we're carrying this out. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for bringing it early. And really, I mean, I think all of us do really support this idea of, you know, government providing these kind of the resources needed to share the information as it's designed by law. So thank you for taking the proactive approach to fulfill that. All right, no other business. Let's adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
All right.